Hello friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I am Joycey Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about the democracy around the world. We will analyze the present status of democracy around the world. We will also discuss about the situation of democracy in India. This is a very important topic from your UPSC perspective, especially from your mains examination perspective. Even though there are lesser chances for this type of questions to be asked in your prelims examination, there are chances that in your mains examination, analysis of democratic situation around the world can be asked. So from that perspective, we will analyze the status or the present status of democracy around the world. Let us first come to the current affair. Now, if we analyze the current affair, we will see that there is a failure of democracy in the West. From different examples, from different current events, we understand that there is a failure of democracy or democratic institutions in the West. Now, if we talk about the origin of democracy, the system of democracy was originated or it was invented by the West, by the Western countries. But even though the invention of democracy happened in the West and later these democratic values or democracy got exported into the rest of the world, that is to other parts of the world, now we are seeing a failure of democracy and democratic institutions in the West. We are talking about the Western countries. So here what is important is that the invention and the origin was from West and it got spread into the rest of the world. Now why there is a reason or what are the reasons for failure of democracy in the West? Now let us come to the functioning of democracies at present, the present status of democracies around the world. Now what we observe around the world is that democratically elected governments are in office but not in power. Now what does it mean? Now democratically elected governments means those governments who are elected by the people. Now democracy is a form of government which is of the people, by the people and for the people. So here under a democracy, the government is elected by the people, that is in the office. So in office or nominally we will see that there is a democratically elected government in office but not in power. It means that in real terms, a democratically elected government does not act in favor of people or they does not function for the people because it is a government of the people but it does not really work for the people. Now let us come to some of the countries in Europe. In Europe, in many countries we see that there is an instability. There is an instability with the governments. So in many countries in Europe, they are not able to form stable governments. This is because the largest party does not have a command in majority. So one reason for instability or unstable nature of the government is because of the large role of coalition politics. That is, one major party or one political party is not able to command a majority, which leads to the formation of a coalition party or a coalition politics. Now what is meant by coalition? Coalition is when different political parties form or come together in order to form a government. This is when one single party does not have the majority to form a government. What will happen? A coalition or a grouping of different political parties who come together to form a government forms the government. So this is meant by coalition. So coalitions are more and more becoming popular in many countries in Europe and coalition governments are considered to be unstable or unstable government. And what is the ultimate result of this coalition governments? The parliaments are not able to pass laws. This is because a coalition is a group of political parties who will come together to form the government. Maybe in a coalition, some political parties would be in favor of a particular decision and some other political parties will not be in favor. They will be not favoring the particular decision. So in an era of coalition politics, it is very difficult to pass laws in the parliament. So they are unable to pass laws. Now let us come to India. Compared to the above example, in many European countries, India is relatively in a better position. This is because of the stability in the government. In the last two terms, that is since 2014, what we see in India is a stable government. A party is able to form majority or is able to form the government with a majority of seats. So there is stability in politics and therefore there is stability in political decisions as well. Now, This stability has given a strong government at the center. Now, if we see, from 2014 to 2019 was the first term of the Narendra Modi government. Now, from 2019 again the second term of the Narendra Modi government has started. Again in 2019 we see that this government is very stable because the political party, the major political party BJP or the Bharatiya Janata Party is able to command a majority in the parliament. And as a result of this, in the parliament we see that many laws are getting passed. This is because the government or the party in power is able to get the majority support in the parliament, therefore it becomes very easy to pass the laws. But this is not the case with many of the Western countries, European countries. Because of the coalition politics and the influence of coalition politics and political parties, they are unable to pass laws. But when we compare it with present situation in India, we see a stable government and also passing of laws. So legislation is taking place speedier or easily. Now let us come to the drawbacks of democracy. Now first one, a democratic government with a majority, especially a large majority, they can become authoritarian as a dictatorial one. Now let us take the case of India. Now the BJP or the Bharatiya Janata Party has a majority in the parliament. So what really happens or what can happen is that this political party, since they have a majority in the parliament, they can neglect or they cannot consider the opinion and the views of other political parties in the parliament. This is because they already have a majority. If they want to pass some laws, they can easily clear it in the parliament. So they need the support of the other political parties. So without consultation and taking opinion from other political parties, it becomes easy for the party which has a majority to pass laws. So it will become authoritarian in nature. Now let us come to a majoritarian democracy. And the major problem with the majoritarian democracy is that the majoritarian democracy will not be able to a larger extent, find solutions for complex problems. This is because they deny the minorities or they deny the opinions and the views of the minorities. While they frame laws or when they design legislations, they do not consider the opinion and the views of the minority parties. So this kind of decision making or law making becomes less participatory in nature. Now, those who are dissatisfied of the decision of the government or those who are not able to accept the decision of the government, what is the option left out? They will go to the courts. So judiciary is the last resort. And now here, only in those countries where there is an independent judiciary, this can happen. In India, we have an independent judiciary. Judiciary is separated from the legislature and the executive. So in those countries which do not have an independent judiciary, courts are also not an option for them. This is because the courts or the judiciary is dependent or they are a part of the legislature or the executive. So in India we have an independent judiciary. So in those countries which have an independent judiciary, the option left out is that they can approach the courts in order to resolve their issues. Now let us take some example. Suppose the BJP government has passed a constitutional amendment bill. Suppose it amends the constitution and suppose the minority parties, for example the Congress, the Indian National Congress, if the minority parties are not satisfied with the decision or the policy of the BJP government. So what this minority party can do? They can approach the court of law. They can approach the Supreme Court in order to interpret the constitution better or in order to find the legality or the constitutionality of the particular amendment. So this can happen if there is an independent judiciary. Now, what is the limitation with the courts? Even though we have an option to approach the courts, the court also has a limitation. This is because the purpose of the judiciary or the court is not policy making. The purpose of the court or judiciary is to interpret the laws that are written or to interpret the constitution. It will only see whether the laws are constitutionally valid, whether the laws comply with the provisions of the constitution. They cannot make a policy. They cannot interfere in policy making. They can only check the constitutionality of the laws. Now, let us come to the case of India. Let us come to the role of judiciary as a supervisor. Now, in India, we often term it as judicial overreach or judicial activism. This is when the judiciary interferes or intervenes into the policy making or the functions of the legislature and the executive. So in India, we have seen in many cases the judiciary has overreached into the jurisdiction of the legislation, and this is what we call as judicial activism. And judicial activism is a very good example where we can say that there is something missing in Indian democracy. This is because we have legislature, we have executive, and we have judiciary. These are three organs of the government. Now, it is a duty and the function of the legislature to frame laws for the country, policies for the country, the governance norms for the country. Now, if the judiciary is interfering into the jurisdiction of the legislature to come out with governance policies or governance reforms, it is a judicial activism, and this indicates that there is something missing in Indian democracy. Now let us come to referendums. Referendums are a direct democracy tool. In referendum, the opinion of the people are collected directly from the people itself. Now, at times, referendums also go ineffective. This is because a small majority will determine how things has to go. Now, for example, 52% of people living in Britain wanted to leave the European Union. There is a Brexit. Now, 48% did not want to leave the European Union. Now, what will happen? The majority decision will be taken care. Here also the interest of all the people cannot be considered. Now, let us come to institutions in democracy. We can divide the institutions in democracy into two. One is those institutions which help in establishing the democracy. Second one is those institutions which will ensure the proper functioning of the democracy. Now let us come to those institutions which will establish democracy. So these institutions which will establish democracy, they are known as the vertical pillars. Now, what are the examples of vertical pillars? For example, election commission or elections. This is a vertical pillar because this is through the elections that the democracy is being established in a country. Now, second pillar is those institutions that ensure the better functioning or the proper functioning of the democracy. And these are institutions which will give strength and stability to the democratic structure. So in reality, what is happening? Too much attention is given to vertical pillars for conducting the elections or things that will establish a democracy. But those institutions that will ensure proper functioning of democracy, they are not given much importance or significance. So this is another drawback in democratic institutions. Now let us see what is required for a healthy democracy or what will constitute a healthy democracy. So first of all, what we need to understand is that a democracy is not merely conducting elections or through elections people elect their representatives, and it is also not passing of laws by the representatives. So merely conducting elections and passing of legislations or law will not constitute a democracy. Now in case of India, we have a constitution. And India also conducts free and fair elections. Now, the parliament passes various laws. So, all these are some features of democracy. That is, constitution is there, a written constitution, the conduct of free and fair elections, passing of laws by the legislature or by the parliament. So, these are all features of democracy. But this is not just enough to ensure that a country has a democratic government. So, for that, what is required? It requires institutions which are capable of strengthening the democratic principles or strengthening democracy in a country. It also needs public space and media. This is where people can freely speak up their opinion. They can come up with their opinion, their suggestions. And they also need constitutional institutions. That is, a healthy democracy needs constitutional institutions like the parliament, like the courts, judiciary, etc. Now, if we talk about public space and media, these days the role of social media in this regard is improving. This is because people are getting many opportunities through the social media to express their views themselves. So, providing more public space and providing more space to the media and strengthening of constitutional institutions will ensure that a democracy is a healthy democracy. Now, let us come to the case of India. What is the need for quotient for India? Now, what is needed for a healthy democracy in India is to limit the democratic governance. So what must be done? For that, the government should be strengthened on the ground. At the ground level or at the bottom level, government should be strengthened and limit democratic governance. Now what is the way ahead? And for that, we need to strengthen the middle layer. Now what consists of the middle layer? The middle layer consists of those institutions within the democracies. So strengthening of the institutions is what is required. Now at the top level is the formal government institutions. Now at the middle level something is missing, and at the down level or the bottom level we have the open public space. So in order to connect the open public space with the formal government, we need middle layer institutions. So this middle layer will consist of intermediate level, that is unofficial or semi-official institutions that will connect the people with the government. So this will strengthen the democracy in India. You can find the PDF of this lecture on our website www.studyiq.com. You can follow my Facebook page for more video updates. You can also write to me at joycey.studyiq@gmail.com for any of your queries and clarifications. Thank you.